So as we go into our second week of this sermon series about seeing God in the world around us, specifically in Ipswich, I need to let you know that I'm a little jazzed, a little excited about this particular message. You may not know it to look at me, but I am huge into Revolutionary War related things and the founding of the country things. If you were to ask me who my favorite president is, it's also the same answer who I think the best president was. That's John Adams. As I think about that, I get into actual history. I love to read the books. I love to watch movies about this time. My favorite movie, one of them is actually the musical 1776. I know that's weird. I listen to it all the time. I haven't. I actually bought the comic book of it. I love this part of American history. And so you can imagine my surprise when early on in my first month here, I spent some time wandering around Ipswich. And as I got to the center of town, I found this plaque that essentially states that the idea that would lead to the rallying cry of no taxation without representation was born here in Ipswich. Now let me give you just a brief paraphrase of the history. I was telling Steve, we don't have time for me really to share and to gloss over and then drop all the things out, but I'm going to give you the paraphrase version. In the 1680s, the King of England revoked the charter for the Massachusetts Bay Colony in an attempt to bring the colonies more under control of the Crown. When this happened, several territories were merged together into one region, and the former governor of New York, Edmund Andros, was appointed to oversee it all. And so through Andros, the Crown tried to levy taxes and bring in new fines. And the people of Ipswich and the surrounding areas said, no, we're not going to do that. In a meeting here in Ipswich, a statement was made, and this phrase was a part of it, by which it is enacted that no taxes shall be levied on ye subjects without consent of an assembly chosen by ye freeholders for assessing the same. That's the precursor to no taxation without representation. That's the birth of that statement. The people involved in this meeting were arrested. All kinds of things went down and eventually led to the revolution. There was a statement that Ipswich is the birthplace of the revolution, the birthplace of the beginning of that. This phrase that was inspired by words 70 to 80 years before the revolution became a major part of that revolution. These words held power and inspired those who were looking to seek justice and freedom. That's what we can learn from Ipswich about God, what we can see about God in Ipswich around us, in the world around us, and being God's people this week. Words have power. James, the brother of Jesus, devoted a passage in his letter directly related to the power of words and how we can use them. If you're not familiar with the book of James, it's a small book. I'd encourage you to read it. It is the practical advice for how to live as God's people. If the Sermon on the Mount tells us how to be God's people, James says practically this is how you get it done. And he spends a passage talking about words, and let me share with you part of it. If we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships. Though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pirate directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. James is concerned with words in this advice of how to live practically as the people of God. Because our reason for existing is to be in relationship with God and with each other, and the words we use will either grow those relationships or break them. James makes an important statement here in these opening verses of chapter 3. Most people kind of rush past these to get to the next section, where it talks about the tongue being set on fire by hell, and the tongue being a listless and restless, poisonous evil in the world. Many pastors will go there because honestly, that preaches, right? Pastor gets up here and is like, the tongue is set on fire by hell. And people are like, oh, really? We skip these first couple of verses and miss something extremely important before we get to that point. James tells us of the bridle and the rudder. He's essentially talking about the horse, a large and powerful animal that can be turned and led by the bit, this little small piece of metal in its mouth. He talks about a boat, the idea that boats are large and unseemly and have to have the wind to push them down the water, a powerful force. And yet it is turned from side to side and led to where it will go by this comparatively small piece of wood called the rudder. The idea that James is trying to convey, that he wants us to know, is that even though the tongue, the source of words, is small compared to the rest of the body, even though the tongue is small and almost seemingly insignificant compared to what the body can do, it is the tongue, the words that we say and the words that we use, that will ultimately guide us in what we do and where we end up. We see this in all the great orators of history. When Malcolm X said, "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us," that was powerful, and it stirred people to action. When Martin Luther King Jr. stood up in front of a group of people and said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," those words have power. They stirred people to action. When Winston Churchill said, "We shall not flag nor fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France and on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches, the landing grounds, and fields, and streets, and on the hills." That was a powerful statement that stirred people to action. Now, I could go on and on with different speaking points from different orators throughout history, but I think you get the point. Words have power. Words lead to action. Words change the world around us. That's what James is saying. And yes, he does eventually go on in this section to warn that words can lead us to destruction. So as a people of God, what James is saying is we need to measure our words. We need to contemplate the words that we use, where they will lead us, where they will push and pull those around us in life. In case you're sitting here today and you're wondering what words should we use as God's people, because James doesn't necessarily tell us that, never fear. Scripture has you covered. I promise you, that's always the place to look. If you don't know what to do next, go look to Scripture. In Ephesians chapter 4, we are given rules and guidelines for those that have new life as God's people. And in verse 29, we're told this: "Let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is good for building up, as there is a need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear." So if you're wondering what words we need to be using, what words we need to be measuring and paying attention to, it's those words. Words that build up. Words that offer grace. Words that lead into opportunities for new life. Words that lift people up around us regardless of race or nationality or creed or politics. Words that put us on the same level. Words that say to others, "I see you." Words that extend grace. That is love to all people, as all people are created in the image of God and all are worthy of living life as such. Right now, though, you might say, that sounds awesome, that sounds good. You share these quotes from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and Winston Churchill, arguably some of the greatest orators of our day. That's not me. When do I have those opportunities to stand in front of a group of people to say those words? What does that look like in real life? What does it look like in the world that we live in now? Where words are often used in anger, to tear down, to demean, to create barriers between people. What's an everyday application that we can jump into? It just so happens that God plans things out. It just so happens that, as I've shared before, I don't believe in coincidences. Something happened that last week that I want to share with you now. As an example, after service last Sunday, the phone was ringing and I answered the phone. And a person said, "Are you the pastor?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And their first question to me was, "Do you ever work?" And I was like, "I do. I'm part-time. I'm here 3 days a week." Their next statement was, "Why can't your church have a full-time pastor?" And I said, "I don't know. We don't. It's okay." And then they went from that to, "Do you not take pride in your church? I drove by and the grass was nearly as tall as I am. Why don't you cut the grass to take care of the grounds?" And I explained to them that we do cut the grass. I explained to them that the trustees were meeting because we were having some landscaping issues and they're working on those things to take care of the church. And then they told me that they had thought about coming to church that Sunday, but couldn't do it because of how disrespectful we had treated the church building. They couldn't bring themselves to walk in the door. This person's phone call was one that had words of frustration, words of anger, words meant to bring shame, and words to reprimand, words that might cause division. But as I listened to what they were sharing as we talked, I answered their worries and concerns as best as I could. And as we had this conversation, the words that I responded with were words of listening, words of understanding, words of empathy, of care and concern for what they were saying. And our conversation shifted in the middle to this person then telling me about their history with the church. That both her and her brother had come to this church and grown up in the church. That they were very familiar with Skip. I think that's the last pastor they knew, because they asked me if I'd come after Skip. And I said, no, there's a couple in between. And our conversation then went good, and she shared all kinds of wonderful thoughts and ideas. And our conversation ended this way. She said, thank you for your time. Next time I'm in town, I'll come by and worship with you. So we went from an opening statement of, I wouldn't walk in the door of your church, to an ending statement of, I'll worship with you next time I'm there. And it's because of the words that are used, the words that are chosen. I don't always get it right, but I try. As she called and had these words of anger, they turned into words of reminiscing. Words of the comfort she had received here. Words of good memories of times she had worshipped. In the middle of that conversation, instead of continuing down a negative path, we got into a good place. That's a big switch from the start of our conversation and how it began. It's important. It's a good example of how we use words maybe in everyday language. The only way we got there, though, is instead of responding in a saucy, combative way, I chose words that I hope will lead us to a different place. Our words have power. Just like in the 1680s, where words were spoken that eventually birthed a revolution and would change the course of the world, our words today have that same power. It could be on that grand macro scheme, or it could be in these micro moments of just one-on-one conversation. I encourage you this morning to take heart to what James has told us about how our words guide our lives. And how if we are not careful with them, we will find destruction, we will find brokenness. I hope that you will spend time this week with God, asking God to share with you the right words and the right ways to live new lives as new people, like we're told about in Ephesians. I hope you'll contemplate how you use words and spend time thinking about words that build people up around us. Words that bring grace, words that bring mercy, words that bring love. But before we go this morning, one final caveat, one thought to keep in mind. Using words that build one another up, to build these relationships, to help each other become who God has made us, is going to be exceedingly hard. I don't share this telling you this is an easy thing to do. I don't think that as James shares these words and we look at what Ephesians says and we look at the world around us, it's like, oh, this is no problem. We live in a world right now where words have been shaped into weapons. Where words are used by everyone, from the everyday average person on the street to the leaders of the world, that seem to beat down and to push down and to trash talk and to demean. Our nature, honestly, for ourselves, for many, when someone throws some salty words our way, might be to respond in kind. I want to be completely honest with you. When that person called me last week and they started about the grass, the response I had in my head was, if you've got a lawnmower, come cut it. But those words aren't going to get it done. That's going to cause a fight. That's not what I wanted. That's not what God would have me do. So I chose other words. And I do want to tell you that I was able to choose other words, not because I'm an awesome person. I have told you many times I have flaws, I have issues, I have problems. My background is subject to all kinds of issues. The only way that I was able to do that, the only way that any of us will be able to do that, is because we are new people. And we became those new people through the work of Christ on the cross. That's what happens. That's what it means. As Christ paid the price on the cross, as Christ was buried, as He was risen again, the idea is that we are born again, we are raised again as new people with new natures. That's the only way we can do these hard things. I promise you, I don't have it within me to curb my words. Leave it up to me and I will be snarky every time. It's because of that new creation, that new birth, that Spirit of God that we understand comes to live within us, that hopefully, more often than not, my words are good ones. This morning, as Laura comes up to lead us in our final song, I want to encourage you. Think about the words we're singing. Think about the words that we use to each other daily. Think about the words and conversations that you may have had. Think about the words and conversations you are having and the ones that you will have. Words have an economy. They have power. They have value. We cannot go on living like they don't, like we just say whatever we want to flippantly at any time. We are made for relationship. We are made to love God and to love one another, and our words should show that as well. And so this morning I encourage you, spend some time thinking about what you say and how you say. As Lauren leads us in this song will be our benediction. This song will be the blessing that I would ask you to leave this place with and go out into the world around us to share, to give to others, to love God and to love others. But invite all who are able to stand and to sing.